The opinions and viewpoints expressed in .NET Rocks are not necessarily those of its sponsors, or of Microsoft Corporation, its partners, or employees. .NET Rocks is a production of Franklin's Net, which is solely responsible for its content. Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter. Rockheads, stop reading your man files and listen up. It's time for another stellar episode of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Rory Blythe. This is Jeff Maciolik here to announce show number 75 with guest Miguel de Icaza, recorded live Thursday, August 5th. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter, and now offering hands-on VBNet and ASP.NET classes remotely. Online at www.franklins.net. And by Data Dynamics, makers of ActiveReports.net. Simple, powerful, and cost-effective reporting for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.datadynamics.com. Support is also provided by Dundas Chart, advanced technology, advanced results. Online at www.dundaschart.com. Support is also provided by Code Magazine, Microsoft Technologies in-depth for IT managers and developers. Online at www.code-magazine.com. And now, the man brave enough to take on Miguel mano a mano, Carl Franklin.
Yo. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to another stellar edition of .NET Rocks. I'm your host, Carl Franklin, in Jacksonville, Florida tonight, doing the remote thing. And as always, my friend with a chihuahua out there in Portland, Oregon, my co-host, my partner in crime, now a Microsoft wonk, Mr. Rory Blythe. How are you doing, Rory, sir?
I'm doing good. My dog's being really, really bad, the chihuahua you just talked about. He's sitting behind me, and I think he barked about 30 seconds ago, but I'm hoping he's going to be quiet for the rest of the show. I'm good. The dog's being bad. He's being a naughty dog. But aside from that, things are good.
Yeah, he was. You had a little dog emergency earlier.
Yeah, actually. I was all set to do the show. I was getting the audio module set up. I was going to plug everything in. I go to turn it on. I get no power. So I'm thinking, what's going on here? I follow the cord back to the AC adapter, and it turns out that my dog, who is obviously not satisfied with the 3 square meals we furnish him every single day, day in, day out, decided to eat the power adapter as well. So there was just a little mess of plastic and chewed-on cables down there, and I had to run down to Radio Shack really quick, pick up a replacement, come back here, plug everything in, and finish putting the news together.
So did you have to give me your serial number and your social security number and your address?
No. No, they've gotten a lot better.
Yeah,
they just asked for my zip code, and I was in such a hurry that I didn't even take the time to tell the guy to piss off. I just gave him the zip code, and we went along with it, and it was all good.
Cool. So
got back in the car, got back here.
How you been doing? You've been doing a lot of blogging. A lot of great stuff on your blog this week.
Yeah, I've been getting back into blogging on a regular basis because I don't know what it is. It's like something just flipped. I think I'm so happy about the new job at Microsoft, and I feel like I have so much direction, and I'm doing what I really want to be doing right now, that it's kind of, I don't know, I guess kind of permeating my entire life. And that sort of motivated me to write a bit more and just do a bit more stuff. I guess I have a little bit more energy.
Well, and if you've never read Rory's blog, it's not just all about programming. In fact, a lot of it is just brilliant writing. And in fact, I was dying laughing today. I looked at the where to get your rich and fruity sauce, in which you referred to a blog, Ian, who posted about a British food store, and then you had links to all these British food products at this web store, and your commentary is just incredibly funny. I just wet myself reading this. Some of these things. You said, here's one. You had a link to Bennett Opie pickled walnuts. The pickled peanuts are good too, but nothing beats an Opie pickled walnut.
Well, what in the hell is a pickled walnut?
I don't know. How can you pickle a nut?
And what do you do with them? That's
Bisto original powder. You said This is really the best powder that you can buy anywhere, and it sure beats the poorly executed Bisto powder Mark II.
Well, I love it because what is original powder? I don't even know what it's for. It's just powder.
Really.
It's
just
so
powder.
suspicious.
Generic powder. And the Branston Rich and Fruity sauce, you said, this is a lifesaver because I was getting sick of going out for dinner just to find out that my favorite restaurants didn't have any rich and fruity sauce. I'd be all like, what in the hell kind of place is this? No fruity sauce? What do you expect me to put on my Norfolk Manor pickled cockles? Shipham's bloater paste? And these are all linked items. Shipham's bloater paste.
I just love that.
That
Because
is
I don't
so
know what any of
funny,
this stuff is. What the hell is bloater paste? Corey asked me that this morning, too, after reading the entry. She said, what is bloater paste? And I don't know. There was no photo. There's no description. I'm guessing it's just bloater that's been pounded into a paste. But what the hell is bloater?
And you say, are you trying to make me sick? Everybody knows bloater paste is meant for fruity malt loaf, but only a perverted weirdo would try to put it on pickled cockles. I suppose next you're going to want me to eat my Bisto chicken gravy granules without any Coleman's creamy seafood sauce.
Yeah, they eat weird stuff, you know. Of course, they probably think we eat weird stuff, and they'd probably be right, especially if they went to go see Super Size Me.
True.
But their stuff, you know, there's just some weird food out there.
And it's the funny sounding names, too, that just kill you.
Well, there's so much rhythm in that. That's what I liked about it. Next, you're going to want me to eat my Bisto chicken gravy granules without any Coleman's creamy seafood sauce. You know, it's like reading really
Nursery
bad
rhymes.
Shakespeare. Yeah, or nursery rhymes or
Wacky,
something.
picky wacky.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
So that was some crazy stuff. Yeah, so I've been having fun with the blogging, and I've also been trying to. I've been getting set up with my new life at Microsoft. Going through all that stuff, and you know, there's a lot of emailing going on, and I'm going to be heading down to Dallas next week for my new employee orientation, and then after that, I'm going to head down to shadow Russ Festino, your buddy.
Yeah, that's right. He told me about that last night.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, my first week I get to spend in Florida. You know, it doesn't get much better. And then after that, I'm going to fly back to Portland, then fly back out. I'm going to go to Louisville, Kentucky for a couple of days. Then I'm going to go up to Cincinnati, Ohio, and this is for a little more shadowing and possibly helping to give some presentations. Mm-hmm. Then after that, I'm going to fly back here, and then a week later, I think I'm going to Tacoma, Washington, and then I'll be presenting in Portland. And yeah, I'm so excited.
That's
this is going to be an awesome job. So
yeah, and you also address some of the questions that people are all asking you, like, and we said on last week's show too, like, does this mean you're not doing .NET Rocks? Are you going to stop blogging? You know, and nothing could be further from the truth. So.
Yeah, because the two things really help each other out. Yeah,
exactly.
The .NET Rocks stuff helps out with the MSDN Presenter stuff. The MSDN Presenter stuff helps out with .NET Rocks.
It all works out.
It's good. It's a very good thing. So I'm not going to stop doing that. So what have you been doing? What's up with you?
Yeah, well, I'm in Jacksonville right now, Jacksonville, Florida. And as a matter of fact, last night, Russ came up to do an MSDN event right here in Jacksonville. So I went, and it turned out that, you know, his presentation was only an hour long, and people sometimes stay an extra hour, and he didn't really have anything planned. So I whipped out like the latest beta or alpha of the .NET Rocks movie and showed some funny clips, and that had people rolling, and that was fun. And afterwards, we went out to have a little drinky poo and with a few people, and he told me that you were coming down to shadow him. So
yep,
that's fantastic. It's all good. And right now, I'm here because I'm actually teaching. I'm teaching at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office here, and it's a huge police department, and it's not just the city, but the county, you know, like the whole area. And as I was doing this yesterday, there was like a hostage situation right across the river, and like they deployed a SWAT team from the very building that I was teaching in, and it was all on the news and stuff. There was some guy who was holed up in an office building. Apparently he was a lawyer, and he wanted some judge who made a ruling on a case that he represented to resign because he thinks she made a wrong. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the mayor or somebody talked him out of it and got him to come down. But I guess he had a bomb, and it was really wild. It was like, you know, the biggest excitement I've had in a long time. So,
wow.
But he's okay. He's in jail, and everybody's safe, and nothing happened. But it was, you know, it was weird because it was right across the river, and you know, the police that were handling it were right there in the building.
Oh man, whoa, that's crazy.
Crazy.
And you're teaching at the sheriff's office. So what is it, like the VBNet crime unit? I mean,
yeah, that's yeah, that's right. Yeah. Halt in the name of VBNet. Yeah. So, hey, don't reach for that dim. That was bad. All right. Well, anyway. Well, anyway, no. What it is they have a in-house IT department that handles their applications that they need to write for logging warrants and all the crime fighting stuff that they do, and they're into .NET. So
cool.
You're right. Nice group of people, and that's what I've been doing. So we got a lot of mail. We got quite a few letters of email. Seems like we had this lull, and then we sort of lined up quite a few excellent people to speak, and now they're sort of coming out of the woodwork with mail. And man, last week's show was just great with Kimberly Tripp. So we got some good comments. And so here the first one is from Gabriel Streidel, who says, "Man, Carl, way to go! You finally landed the mono god himself, Miguel de Icaza, but you do it on Doom 3 week." I'm so hyped to hear Miguel on the show. I'm so hyped to blast the friggin' hell out of some badass Martians. I'm so hyped I want to cry. Guess I'm just going to have to call into work tomorrow. Thanks, Carl. Gabe Zilla. P.S. You guys do a great job. Hopefully Rory can infect the Microsoft Borg Collective with some of his mind droppings and Google weirdos. Come on, Longhorn weirdos. All right, Gabe, we're going to send you a .NET Rocks mug. And this one came from David Foster. "Hi, guys. Your shows just keep getting better. The Speaker's Lounge was great. Kim was better. Kim was excellent. My views are probably biased. I'm running a class this semester on exposing MS SQL via ASP.NET. And I've been looking for a resource I could point the students toward as a reference of how SQL should be done. This is it. I've listened to this show 3 times, live and twice offline. Best regards, David Foster." All right, David. That's some significant sucking up, don't you think, Rory? I think that deserves a little swag. And Carolus Holman says, "Imagine my joy when you started using tinyURL to voice encode your on-air URLs. I set an audible right on while on the bus listening to the latest show on my iPod. Fellow bus riders gave me that I hate people who talk on their cell phones too loudly look. It was much easier to get the URLs this time. Congrats on getting the gig with Microsoft. MSDN is a great resource. Now with all my gushing, I will note that I posted the tinyURL idea on Carl's blog. So being the swag whore that I am, please send me some swag, or at least a shout out." And there's a shout out to Carlos. No, I'm kidding. We'll send you some. How you doing, Carlos? No, we'll send you a .NET Rocks coffee mug, soon to be a collector's item, I'm sure. And Matt Davison says, "Carl, love your show. I would love to see Anders Heilsberg as a guest on your show. That would be sweet. Thanks." Yeah, so would we, actually. Wouldn't we?
I think we would. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've asked
that's
him.
one of those givens, really.
Absolutely. We've asked him, and hopefully someday he'll grace us with his presence,
He's
bring
kind
a little
of
class
a busy
to our
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, bring a little class to our otherwise tactless and tasteless show, according to Cold Cash, anyway. So, hey, Carl, Rory, Jeff, and Richard. This comes from 21-year. He says, "I'm a 21-year-old. Maybe I'm the youngest listener to .NET Rocks. He from Malta, Europe, who has just finished a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science and currently working as a freelance .NET developer. Well, enough of that crap. However, an interesting trend that has taken place at our local university is that the computer science lecturers have, over the past 2 years, moved over to .NET when previously they were hardcore Unix zealots, and every assignment had to be implemented in C. Despite this fact, there still exists a couple of lecturers who, like the old Christopher Anthony, just keep dissing Microsoft and .NET, the old Christopher Anthony, by the way. Well, maybe one day they'll see the light. Like Christopher Anthony has. Do we say that Christopher Anthony has seen the light? Yes, we think we did.
Yeah, he definitely.
Yeah. He's been converted. He is now 7 of 9 or whatever. I have been listening to the show since the 3rd show, and I think it's awesome. And as the days go by, the show keeps getting better. I think Rory rocks, and I have somewhat become a fan of his. Guess that is somewhat worrying. One of the downsides is that I cannot listen to the show live anymore, as that would mean I would have to wake up at 3 a.m. But come Mondays, I keep refreshing the webpage impatiently, waiting till the show goes online. .NET Rocks has definitely become part of my weekly agenda. I'm looking forward to the forthcoming shows with Miguel de Icaza and Charles Petzold. I've tried giving Mono a try. However, Linux and its very easy-to-use package installation procedure is driving me up the wall. We'll find out about that. Well, maybe eventually I'll figure it out and manage to run Mono. Mind you, not that I will ever drop Windows for Linux. As my friends say, I should have Microsoft tattooed on my chest, since I am a hardcore MS fan. Well, keep up the great work and keep the shows coming. Cheers, Michael. Cool. Michael, you get yourself a nice piece of hardware. Porcelain, to be exact, with some paint on it. So that's the mail, and now I guess it's time for the news. And here with the news of the week, it's Rory Blythe.
Well, the first thing I wanted to talk about is last week I started using TinyURL, which probably made a lot of people really, really happy. And this week I'm going to stop using TinyURL. But there's a good reason for it. It's that this guy, Kyle Tinsley, emailed me after the show, and he pointed me to a totally .NET TinyURL-like application that he wrote called Shrinkster. So that's at shrinkster.com, SHRINKSTER. It does pretty much the same thing as TinyURL, but it has a cool tracking feature as well, so that once I shrink a URL, I can check to see how many times that the smaller URL gets hit.
Yeah, right.
So you get some stats, and that's pretty cool. So I use Shrinkster this time instead of TinyURL. Got to have some .NET pride, you know. So the first bit of news that we're taking a look at is something that was sent in by John V. Barone, and the title is "Web Addiction Gets Conscripts Out of Army." And I guess the idea is that in Finland, there's some people who just simply can't bear the idea of going away to do their mandatory military service because they can't stand the thought of being separated from the internet for 6 months at a time. So they're getting out of doing military service simply because they cannot stop IMing with their friends, which I think is pretty cool. And that's probably how I try to get out of the military too. And if
our friend Jeffrey Palermo is in Iraq, or he was, and I don't know if he still is. Jeff, you have to send us an email and let us know. But he was IMing with us and participating live in the show, so he found some bandwidth, obviously.
Yeah.
I guess it depends where you are.
Well, I think this is the Finnish military, though, and it's possible that it's
the Finnish military.
Yeah,
I missed that part.
Yeah, this is not happening in the States. I don't think we'd be quite so lenient and liberal about things here where the military is concerned.
Yeah.
So that's that, and the URL to that is shrinkster.com/6m. See, that's pretty cool. I mean, very short.
Yeah, we actually, I think Jeff and I, Richard and I got one this afternoon that was like 6F, real. We were like the 101st or whatever it is, 102nd. So that's great.
Yeah, this stuff's pretty brand new. All right. And so the next news item is concerning a small-time operating system called Syllable. This was something that showed up over on OS News. It's called Syllable, the little OS with a big future. And I typically find these stories interesting. Syllable seems to be kind of competing... Not necessarily competing, but maybe in the eyes of the people who follow these OSs, competing with another OS called SkyOS. And these are smaller, from the ground up operating systems that people are putting together in their spare time. And it's not, they aren't happening on the scale of, say, Linux or any of the BSDs or anything like that. This is much smaller scale, and the goals are typically a bit different. And they're really... actually very fascinating. They're interesting little OSs. Sometimes I get a little bit sad because I think that if I had what it takes to build an operating system, I don't think I'd go in and try to imitate the biggies, Windows, OS 10, Linux, and stuff like that. And that seems to kind of be what they're doing. I'd probably want to try to find a whole new set of metaphors rather than going with a traditional file, folder, window metaphor. Just try to come up with something different. But at the same time, even though it makes me a little sad to not see them doing this, their efforts are still really interesting, and there's a lot of work that goes into these that really impresses me. So that's an interesting story.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the URL is HTTP. Well, I don't need to tell you that. The URL is shrinkster.com/6o, and that is the letter O. Awesome. So that's some pretty cool stuff. Then a few weeks ago, I talked about the city of Munich possibly migrating something like 10,000 Windows desktops to Linux.
Yeah, here's
and
a little snag.
yeah, they did. And, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's Linux or that it's open source. The idea of migrating 10,000 desktops from anything to anything else is a nightmare. And I remember just thinking that it doesn't matter really what you're switching from or what you're switching to. It's going to be a very big headache. And if it's not worth it, you shouldn't even bother. And it looks like as you said, there's been a bit of a snag. Although it's not technical, it has to do more with the possibilities of problems with patents. And
we said on the show that we'd monitor their progress and
Right.
see what would happen. So here's the first report card,
So what they're worried about what they're worried about is the possibility that, say, a company like SCO or perhaps SCO would come after them and, start suing the pants off of everybody because there might be some patented code that is showing up in some Linux application somewhere, which is, I think that's a bit of a shame. I'd like to see a huge migration like that fail for technical reasons and not for political reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't like to see it fail at all, but if it had to fail, I would much rather it be a technical problem than anything else. I think it's sad when people are restricted in what they can and cannot use because they have to worry about getting sued by some crazy company that's going around and harassing people.
I totally agree, man.
Yeah. And the final bit of news today is that it's a little tiny thing, and this isn't like worldwide news or anything like that. It's that Chris Sells, .NET Wonk, Longhorn Wonk,
and occasional .NET Rocks guest host.
Yeah, and guest as well.
Yeah, that's right.
The news with him is that he joined Mensa today. So that's kind of weird.
Started Mensa.
Yeah, so that's the news of the week. Oh, and the URL for the Chris Sells joining Mensa article is shrinkster.com/6s. And that's pretty much that.
Now obey.
Excellent job. And, well, man, what can I say about tonight's guest? I've been looking forward to this show for quite a long time. We've been trying to get him on, as you know, for, schedules permitting, and schedule's been crazy. And, of course, Mono came out, and then we sort of scurried to try to get him on, and this was the earliest we could. So let me introduce Miguel de Icaza. Miguel is an employee of Novell right now, but he started the Mono project with his company Zimian, and we're going to talk to him about Mono and what it is. Mono, of course, as you may or may not know, is a Unix-based implementation of the .NET framework, and it's quite interesting. It's available for versions of Linux. It's available for Windows 2000 and higher, and it's available for the Mac as well. And version 1.0 just came out, and we're all excited to talk to him. Miguel, how are you, my friend?
I'm very fine. Thank you for having me in the program. I know it's been difficult to get the schedules worked out.
Well, it was well worth it. I think our fans and your fans will agree.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome.
The discussion going on IRC right now is pretty lively.
Yeah, it certainly is. It was lively before you got there, and when you got there, it just erupted. So you have a lot of fans out there.
Or maybe not.
Well, I don't know exactly what's going on because I haven't been watching it. But are they giving you crap or?
No, there were just a lot of technical questions, and they were fairly interesting, all of them. So
okay, we were getting a little crap before.
Yeah, it was just too technical for general discussions. So it's good that it happened there.
Okay. Well, did you ever in your life think that you would be where you are now?
You mean sitting in my office?
Yeah, sitting in your office. The focal point of this project and what a big noise it's made.
Well, I would say that I'm enjoying working on this thing very much. So I think I thought of myself as doing something fun, whatever it was. So yeah, I guess yeah. I envision myself having fun. That I can say, and it's great that Mono has panned out to be such an interesting project. and it has crystallized a lot of people that joined the effort. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to pull this hack without the help of all of the people who send their little changes and their little contributions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an interesting show of what you can do with a bunch of people on the internet that have a common goal.
How many people are we talking about, and when did it start?
We credited about 300 people on the release notes.
Wow.
We know we missed someone because we just scanned the changelog entries. Not everybody provided a changelog entry. So at least we credited 300 people, but there's probably a bit more of that. I wouldn't be able to estimate how many, but it was quite a lot of guys. Roughly 170 of those have CVS accounts, so those ones are easy to account for. And I would say that those are kind of like the core group that has permission to touch anything on the Mono repository.
And when did it start?
We began in July 2001, roughly in the middle of July of 2001. So it took us almost 3 years. To go from the first release to the 1.0. I mean, from the first code drop, which was pretty much useless, right? It was just a little skeleton to have something that actually worked.
Yeah.
So initially, I predicted this is going to take a year, but people who know how my software predictions go know that I always massively underestimate the time. So this time I was only wrong by 3x.
I think developers are generally overconfident in terms of shipping dates anyway, don't you think?
Yeah, but if you tell somebody, listen, we're going to start a project and we're going to finish in 3 years, I wouldn't be excited about that at all.
Yeah.
So I keep telling myself we're going to ship Mono 2.0 in 6 months.
Well,
so we'll see when that actually ships.
So along these,
that's how I sleep at night, you know.
Along these lines, there's somebody in the chat room, Wade, who just asked how many person hours went into Mono. Do you happen to have that figure?
Oh, that would be so hard to compute. I mean, I guess we can compute the ones that were paid employees of Zimian first and Novell later. But it would be pretty much impossible to count the hours of people on the outside because some people might just spend. I mean, we don't even know how skilled these people are. I mean, somebody might spend 1 hour and write plenty of code or fix plenty of important problems, but it may also take a week for someone who's just getting into the project. So it's really hard to tell how much effort went into this. I mean, sometimes you spend a week tracking like the wrong assignment or the wrong comparison in a loop, right? Tracking it all over the place, and then ends up that it's a stupid bug. So it's hard to tell how much effort went into this.
How about we just leave it at more than 50?
Yeah, more than 50.
Okay,
yeah, more than 50 man hours would be.
Man hours, yeah. That's what I was wondering about too. And before we get too much further, how about in your words, what is Mono?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, it's an open source implementation of the ECMA standard. So of the ECMA standard for C#, the CLI, and then in addition to that, we have implemented two separate stacks. We have implemented the Microsoft.NET stack. So pretty much most of what you see in the .NET 1.1 stack, right? And an independent stack that exploits either Linux or GNOME or Mozilla or Apache specific features. So we're kind of developing our own little ecosystem of tools and libraries that we can use to improve Linux on the desktop and Linux on the server.
Mm-hmm. What is the difference, the main difference between Mono and the .NET Initiative, if you want to call it that Microsoft has? Well,
I think the .NET Initiative is a lot larger. If I had to compare with something, I would say it's purely the .NET framework, and I would compare with the .NET framework.
Okay.
So the differences would be from the .NET framework. Take the .NET framework 1.1 and subtract the following: Visual Basic compiler, JavaScript compiler, and JavaScript runtime. Subtract System Enterprise Services, System Installation Services, COM support. Code access security, CAS. What else am I missing? Managed C++ compiler.
Mm-hmm.
What else? We're very proud of our documentation being laughable. Like every other open source project, that's the signature of any open source project that respects itself.
Mm-hmm.
And what else are we missing?
How about enterprise services and Com+?
Oh yeah,
things?
we're missing enterprise services, Com+. Anything else?
Anything that's really
Windows
Windows.
Forms is missing today. So we're working on Windows Forms, but today is not available.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said the Visual Basic compiler too, but I noticed on your website that somebody is providing a Visual Basic language.
Oh, so here's the full story. We do have a Visual Basic runtime today. So if your application was compiled on Windows, we will run your application on Linux. We just cannot give you a full SDK on Linux today. So that means that if you have source code, there's not much you can do. So you got to compile it first on Windows, copy the binary over, and run it. What we're doing for Mono 1.2 is we're fixing that. We're adding the Visual Basic compiler, and we're adding Windows Forms. Those are the two big things that we're adding to the 1.2 release, aside of adding extra ports of the Mono VM.
Okay. And while we're talking about like what's there and what isn't there and what's different, you want to talk about what the goals of the Mono project are?
Yeah. Well, basically, we were coming from a world of pain in the Linux world. We were developing applications with C and C++ and enjoying spending a couple of weeks with the memory debugger, finding out who released your pointer, why was your pointer getting overridden, why some variables magically have different values, all kinds of threading problems and process problems. And I mean, you can imagine that it's like doing Win32 programming.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're trying to create a full desktop, I mean, a modern set of applications, you really push a lot of these things. So we were coming from building this application called Evolution, which is, imagine it's the Outlook of Unix.
Yeah.
And it was very, very painful. And we were looking at the ways of improving our developer experience, right? How can we reduce our cost of development? How can we raise the programming level from where we were at? And so we were considering different things, language bindings, using Python, using Perl, using Corba to isolate different pieces of the equation. And along came Microsoft and this ECMA standard, and we saw that and we figured this is really interesting. This has a little bit of the sense of Java, but they fixed some of the Java limitations that made it unacceptable.
Okay. Right.
So it was really interesting.
I was going to say that's going to lead to the next question, which is why did you choose to do a .NET implementation instead of just going with Java?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is that Java first had a bad reputation for performance, and I think that a lot of people told Sun what the performance bottlenecks were. But I think that the problem that Sun had was basically that they were in a very comfortable position. They had pretty much the best VM or the best language or productized language out in the market. Maybe Smalltalk or other things could compete, but the point is they had the better productized environment that was reaching the public. They had a good PR behind it, and I think that Sun decided that since they had the best system, they didn't need to improve it. So they ignored the input of everybody who told them your system is low, you need to make these changes. The language has these issues. You need to make these changes to the language, right? I mean, I remember that one of my frustrations with Java was the lack of enums, right? And it took Sun a long time, and it took C#. I mean, until C# came along, they didn't do anything.
But with C#, they finally do it in Tiger, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So when C# did it, they decided to put it in. So I think it's good. I mean, that is only a proof that competition works. But my point is that people had told Sun, listen, you got to implement something like what you guys did with value types. I mean, what Microsoft did with value types. That was one thing. The other thing is that people had tried to implement the Sun stuff, and it was too complicated. I think that Sun at some point decided to become very academic in some of their APIs, and I think that J2EE and Swing reflect a lot of it, which is it's beautiful from a very academic point of view.
But in a real world situation, yeah.
exactly. I mean, everything is model view controller, which I know exactly what they're doing. It makes a lot of sense. It's just that it's very useful in 1% of the cases, and that's. But the problem is that it's only useful in that 1% of the cases.
Right.
Yeah.
And the rest of the cases, you have to do a lot of boilerplate code. So when the Microsoft stuff came out, basically, it had a couple of things going on for it. Multiple language support, which was something that we on the Linux desktop had been struggling to do for a long time. Second, it had a language which was quite nice. It was basically an improved version of Java, right?
Okay.
And it seemed like they had solved some of the performance issues that Java had.
Yeah,
right?
the garbage collection.
So
are you talking about?
You can fix the performance issues with Java if you have a team of really, really talented Java engineers that make your VM scream, right?
Yeah.
But it turns out that you don't need to have that many smart engineers, or you don't need to have that much budget to make a .NET VM that is efficient, right? So I think that was also a turning point.
Miguel, are you talking about when you say limitations of Java, like the garbage collection scheme, for example?
Well, for example, the limitations of Java is the lack of value types, right? So if you want to allocate an array of, 10,000 points, it means that you have to set up 10,000 objects. And in .NET, instead of doing that, you basically allocate a blob of size of the struct multiplied by 10,000, right?
Okay.
So you don't need to set up the objects. They don't need to be garbage collected. You can allocate them on the stack. You can pass them. You can pass them on registers without having to care that they're objects, right?
Right. Why should you have a pointer to a byte, for example?
For example,
seems kind of stupid.
So that was really. I mean, that is one of the things that people have for a long time known that was one of the problems in Java. And I understand where they're coming from, which is in the Java world, everything is secure. You cannot mess around these things. There's no pointers. And I understand some of those things, but I think that the market needed something more than pure Java.
So we've asked you what isn't in Mono. Let me ask you now, what technologies are included in Mono?
So just a quick, very, very executive view of it. It's the virtual machine, a C# compiler, class libraries for MS Core Lib, System XML, ADO, ADO.NET, and ASP.NET. That's part of the regular stack. And then as part of our other stack, we have tons of other things. A separate set of database providers, so you can talk to MySQL and Postgres and DB2 and all of the other databases. RelaxNG, Microsoft likes XML schema. In the open source world, RelaxNG is kind of more of an accepted way of defining your XML document. So we have readers and validators for RelaxNG. What else is in there? GTK Sharp, which is our GUI toolkit. Just like I said, we don't have Windows Forms. What we do have is a replacement, which is better suited for the Unix world, and it's called GTK Sharp.
Does that use Wine? WINE?
No, not at all. We were using Wine for our Windows Forms implementation, but we haven't abandoned that design at this point.
Really?
Yeah.
So what? Tell me about your thought process behind using it in the first place and then scrapping that. Because first of all, let's define it.
Okay, so this is independent of GTK Sharp. So today we still tell people use GTK Sharp if you want to target the Linux desktop, right? For a variety of other reasons like internationalization and accessibility. But when we're doing the Windows Forms stuff, Windows Forms is pretty much an object-oriented wrapper around the Win32 API, and one of the problems is that Windows Forms does expose this WinProc method, right? It's an override that any developer can override and catch messages from this Win32 system. You can catch them, you can respond to them, and
it's nice.
And basically fine-tune your controls if you need to. So if something is not really provided by Windows Forms, or a control is not there, or some of the effects that you need cannot be done with the standard stuff that Windows Forms provide, you could hook up to that. So our thought process was basically, a lot of people are going to be doing WinProc, like games use WinProc, right? Like all of those games that need to catch the keyboard use WinProc.
Right.
And some people are doing p-invokes into kernel 32 or Win32 or user or whatever it's called, right? So we figured if we use Wine, p-invoke will work out of the box, and WinProc will work out of the box. The problem is that Wine and Mono fight with each other over signal handlers.
And Wine is Windows. What is that?
Yeah, and Wine is this emulator of the Win32 API.
For Linux, for Unix, yeah.
So the issue that we have is that the Wine and Mono fight each other for signal handlers and for the debugger information. So it was very hard to make the two of them coexist. So what we're doing now is basically we're writing a completely managed implementation, and we will emulate a few of the WinProc things. So in fact, our message system basically transforms the native window messages into WinProc messages, and we still process them that way, but we won't be offering pinvoke functionality, or we will have to emulate it on a case-by-case basis. So that was the problem. I mean, it was really very hard to debug, and it was really hard to keep the two of them consistent. All kinds of thread problems. The two of them wanted to have ownership over thread control, so that didn't really work out.
Yeah. Okay.
Now the problem is that we had to do it to find out.
So you're thinking now is you're going to just brute force to implement the Windows Forms library?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, as brute force as anything else we've done, right?
Right.
Which is you start from zero and then you build the whole thing on top of it.
Are you going to try to build some kind of kernel like the Win32 system and then write managed code around it, or are you just going to try to write a managed code operating system?
Well, it would be like you said. I mean, it is like a tiny Win32 core.
Yeah.
Not really, but it basically we're going to have to use a WinProc event system. So that we will do. And
cool.
And today we have two backends. We have the Win32 backend and the X11 backend. So that means X Windows and Windows. So it works on both. This new version that we're doing, and we started today to do an implementation for the Mac OS, just to make sure that we don't miss something obvious in the Mac OS to support the Mac OS. So the driver is relatively small. It's like 1,000 lines so far of platform specific code.
Yeah. Well, you know what's ironic, Miguel, is that out of Jeff and Rory, and I don't know about Richard, but definitely have Jeff and Rory and I'm the only one who hasn't run Linux.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I haven't.
One day
yeah.
you will be
soon, soon actually, because I have virtual PC and I plan to do it, but I just haven't put the time into it.
I know. Anyways, our goal is to make Linux sexy, and I think Mono, and thank you to Microsoft for building this thing in the first place. We're gonna make Linux a little bit sexier than it was. Because it was really not something for the public.
Well, speaking of Microsoft and Mono, I've kind of been wondering, do you have any idea how Microsoft is viewing Mono's progress? I mean, and do you feel that Mono brings anything to Microsoft? That is, do you feel that Mono in any way helps Microsoft?
They don't talk too much about it.
That's a huge debate. That's a huge debate. I don't know how Microsoft as a whole sees Mono. I know different people have different opinions of Mono within Microsoft. I think it helps in one hand it helps Microsoft, and the other one it doesn't, right? It helps in that we promote the same platform, we promote the same APIs, we promote C#, the language, right?
Right.
We work together on the ECMAS thing. So from that angle, I think it helps. On the other hand, it doesn't help that there's an implementation of their stack on a separate platform.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that we were able to do .NET 1.1 and 1.0 with what we have today. I think it's going to be a lot more complex to catch up to Longhorn. Because Longhorn, at least WinFS touches everything on the system, and so does Avalon. So I don't think we're gonna. I don't think we're gonna track Microsoft steps with those two, or at least we don't have plans at this point. They seem to be too complex, and we rather invest our time in building managed code for things that take advantage directly of Linux, as opposed to the emulation bits of Windows.
Well, now another thing to kind of follow up on the question is, do you think that there's a possibility that due to certain issues that Microsoft has had in the past, that they might have intentionally left this gaping hole for other people to come along and implement .NET on other platforms?
I don't know. That's a good question. I have to say, Microsoft has been surprisingly open when it comes to .NET. I mean, you have to keep if you keep it in perspective. I don't think Microsoft has ever done as much work to pretty much open up the internals of a technology they developed to the public.
I agree.
I mean, if you look at Word or whatever is the stuff that they did before, I don't think they've gone through the effort and the length that they have with C# and the CLR. I mean, they went to ECMA. They opened up every bit in the file format. They had separate implementations tracking what was going on there. So it's been a superb job, and Microsoft keeps sending updates to. I mean, Microsoft sent the generic specification to ECMA way before it was released to the public.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think they've done a fantastic job in terms of opening up the platform. If it wasn't for that, I don't think we would even be looking at .NET.
Did you start with the rotor source and look at that and learn how it happened? I mean, obviously, the rotor thing, which is the open version of the source code for the framework, it has stipulations in terms of licensing. It's an academic only thing. And so obviously you didn't just, recompile that for Linux and say, okay, we own this now.
Absolutely not. Well, in fact, our implementation was out in the street before Rotor was released. So no, we're actually very happy that most of the stuff that was released with Rotor, we either had it working or we were in progress in those areas, which was something that scared me because when you get code from a contributor, you don't know where it's coming from. So
right.
I was worried that if Rotor was released too early, people would just copy-paste code, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that's the reason I brought it up because, we
didn't want people to copy-paste it. So I'm glad to say that we made our own set of mistakes and we managed to get implementation of most of what was being shipped before Rotor shipped. So we had the JIT, we had the VM, we had the collector, we had most of MS Core Lib, we had most of the security stuff. The cryptography stack, the system XML, all that stuff done before Rotor was released. So there was really little in Rotor when it came out that was useful to us. But still, I ask people to not look at Rotor if they're planning on contributing to Mono.
Yeah, just for conflict of interest purposes, or
well, it's just you don't want people to accidentally send you a file, right? Or say, hey, this is a. I mean, we got a lot. At some point, somebody was sending us disassembly chunks of code because they needed functionality. Right? It's like, dude, that is just not right.
Yeah.
It will be this Russian guy sending this message like, this is the missing functionality you need. And it's like, oh, I don't think you understand how this works.
Yeah, yeah. How does GNOME relate to Mono? What's the relationship between you guys and GNOME?
Well, I founded the GNOME project, which was is this desktop environment for Linux. But I've kind of left it to more professional people to run that job, right?
Okay.
So there's not a direct relationship other than a historical one, and the fact that I work in the same building as some of the guys working on the GNOME desktop.
Okay.
So I try to encourage them to use managed code, and it seems a lot of them are buying into C#. I think people are sick and tired of developing with old technologies, and you've seen a couple of the pieces that we've done. We've done this thing called the dashboard and Beagle, FSpot, and a bunch of little other desktop applications. And
these are all on your website, right?
Yeah, they're all on the GNOME CVS repository. So we're putting them into CVS. Red Hat doesn't like .NET at all, so they don't want to ship any of that code, which is too bad for them, right?
Yeah, too bad. Yeah.
I mean, they don't get to ship all of the cool stuff and all the more
to have buffer overruns till the cows come home.
Nicer, sexier stuff that we do.
Right.
Too bad for them.
Somebody in the chat room wanted to know what version of Linux you use to write Mono.
Well, I use different versions because first of all, Mono, we have to guarantee that Mono works everywhere.
Sure.
And we also have different kinds of servers at the office historically. So we use pretty much everything from Debian to Red Hat 8, Red Hat 9, Fedora Core 1, Fedora Core 2, which I guess is the same thing with every other development organization. You have a mix of everything. I have a Windows machine on my desk. I have a Mac machine on my desk too. SUSE Linux. What else? Oh, we have a couple of FreeBSD machines and OpenBSD servers as well. So it's a fairly complete mix. What I use on my laptop, though, what I use when I'm traveling is Red Hat 9 at this point.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So, Miguel, a couple minutes ago, you mentioned the building that you work in. Speaking of that building, there's some speculation or some talk right now about Sun wanting to buy it. And a lot of what I've been seeing, of course, is that people are worried about what's going to happen to Mono. What if Sun does wind up buying Novell? It's my understanding that, and I could be completely and totally off base here, but it's nothing would really happen to Mono. Is that right? It's kind of, it belongs to the community.
I don't know what to say because I'm obviously not in.
Yeah,
I've heard obviously the rumor,
really.
But I don't know more than you do about that. But as it is an open source project, it means that even if the 20-something developers that work on Mono from Novell today stopped work on Mono, we still got a community of 280 people outside,
right,
which use Mono. A lot of these people are contributing to Mono because they either had a passion, or they love C#, or they wanted to run their applications on different platforms. So I think that there's a self-sustaining movement already for Mono. In the same spirit that it happened with GNOME. I mean, I'm no longer involved at all with GNOME, and it kind of goes on its own, right?
Yeah.
They even have their own foundation. They have their own people doing their things, and they keep developing it. So I think Mono would continue. If Novell were to stop developing Mono, it would obviously suffer, right? Because it's always useful to have full-time resources working on the project. So it would obviously suffer a little bit, but I'm sure somebody would pick it up. I mean, there's open source has that attribute. It never dies, right?
Yeah.
If the project is interesting or it's useful, somebody picks it up. So I'm sure somebody would pick it up.
Yeah, that's a good point. What would be involved for me to make and compile a VBNet application, let's say a smart client application on my Windows machine, and just take that exe and put it up on the internet and download it from a Mac that's running Mono, and have it run? Like what would break that, or what would be required?
Well, if you have the .exe, and this is only VB.NET, we don't support any other VB.
Okay.
If you have the VB.NET executable and you transfer it in some way or another to Linux, it should run out of the box on your Mac. You should just type mono space and the name of the program. The things that might be missing are things if you use special assemblies. Like I know that a lot of people in Windows use the Magic library, which I don't know what it is, but I know they do because that's kind of apps that don't run. If you use Windows Forms, it won't run. So as long as your application doesn't use Windows Forms today, you're pretty much set to go. The Windows Form situation we hope to rectify in February. So in February you'll be able to run all your Windows Forms apps on the Mac and on Linux and anything else you can think of.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, and how much time more? How much longer do you think it will be before we have Windows Forms? Your best. I mean, you can't commit to anything. But
that's what I was saying. I was saying February.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, we're already working on it. In fact, we've been working on it for quite some time, but it didn't make the cut for Mono 1.0.
Okay.
We shipped it in what we call the alpha mode, and you could run it and run some applications, but it's so incomplete that it's not even funny. So that's why it was not officially released.
I get you.
So we're making progress, and my hope is to freeze the tree in December. So we should be feature complete in December, and then just do the extra 2 months of bug fixing and tuning. So by February you should have it.
So in terms of the WinForm stuff that you guys are doing, are we going to be seeing native widgets, or are you going to be doing your own drawing, kind of like what we see in Swing on Java?
We're implementing the drawing using the native operating system drawing engine. So on Windows, at least on Windows XP, we'll use the UX theme, I think it's called, or UX library, which is the theming library to paint controls to look native. We'll have to emulate the pre-Windows XP to do the right thing on Windows. But it should look native, and we're going to make sure that we get the feeling right. On the Mac OS, there's an equivalent service called the Appearance Manager, which is basically an API to do the exact same thing. You say, please draw a scroll bar here, and whatever is that the system wants to draw it, and you do it that way. And in Linux, we have the GTK Theme API. which basically tracks whatever's the theme that you're using and draws things the way they have to be done. So it will be native.
Okay,
that's good.
And this is a selfish question, just because I've been waiting for so long to be able to write .NET apps for my OS 10 machine for my Apple. Does this have anything to do with Cocoa Sharp, or do you have any news on Cocoa Sharp, or what's going on?
Yeah,
with
what is Cocoa Sharp?
I'll explain. So you know how Windows Forms is this wrapper for Win32, and if you want to take advantage of Windows, you write to Windows Forms, right? You don't use an extra wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done the equivalent thing for Linux, which is called GTK Sharp. You want to take advantage of Linux, you use GTK Sharp. And on the Mac, if you want to take advantage of what the Mac has to offer, we bound the native APIs for the Mac, for the GUI in the Mac, which are called Cocoa. And the guys that did this it's a community on its own. It actually appeared pretty much out of the nothing as soon as we had a JIT running. And these guys have bound the Cocoa API, so you can develop these cute, very nice applications for the Mac using the native API. So that's what Cocoa Sharp is. We're still building Windows Forms for this cross-platform functionality that a lot of people want. But my personal suggestion, and what we're doing actually at Novell for our applications, is we're actually writing 3 different front ends. For example, we have this protocol iFolder, which synchronizes data, and it's like a file system that synchronizes, right? All of the GUI is actually being rewritten 3 times. One using Windows Forms, because that's what you find in Windows, right? And we don't want to have an extra download of 14 megs to install GTK, right?
Right.
So we use Windows Forms on Windows, we use GTK Sharp on Linux, and we are starting to build a Cocoa Sharp UI for the Mac. And that means that we get as native as you can get native. I mean, there's no emulation. Now, I understand that not everybody might want to follow this path, right? I mean, not everybody can afford to implement things 3 times, and that's why we're doing this Windows Forms implementation. But my personal suggestion is still, if you have the resources, just do the UI bits 3 times, and the engine can be pretty much shared across all of them. So if you have the resources, do that, because you're going to get the most out of the native experience and the native features of your operating system. As for when Cocoa Sharp was released, I think it was we haven't announced it on the Mono site yet, because this comes from a separate project, as we will. But it's already uploaded or published into the Apple developer site.
Oh, okay.
You should see it there.
Cool. Miguel, people in the chat room are wondering what the licensing scheme looks like for Mono now and in the future. What's the deal with that?
Okay, so the licensing for Mono uses 3 licenses for different pieces of the code. The compilers are released under the GPL today. We might change that to something even more lax, but today they're under the GPL. The virtual machine, so the runtime that executes their code, is written in it's licensed under the library GPL, which pretty much allows it to be used so you can embed it into your applications, or you can use it to it's equivalent of the CLR hosting, you call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like, so you can do CLR hosting without tainting your code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we license it under the LGPL. And the class libraries are under an extremely liberal license called the X11 license, which is like the BSD license, but without the advertisement clause. So you don't even have to give us credit. You can just copy-paste the code. So that's what we're using for the licenses today. And what that means is that actually a lot of people are taking, cut and pasting Mono code into their Compact Framework applications, because you know how the Compact Framework is missing some things. So we have some fairly complete implementations, especially the crypto stuff and the XML serializer apparently are missing in the Compact Framework. So people tend to cut and paste those chunks and put them into their apps, and that's completely perfect with the license.
That's interesting.
Okay. So once people actually do, I mean, they get all the licensing issues sorted out, and they decide Mono's for them, and they want to sit down, they want to develop with it. One of the things that I think often attracts developers to Microsoft products and keeps them there is the really nice set of IDEs. What's going on in the Mono world in terms of IDEs? Like, if I wanted to sit down and start developing, what would I be using?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, good question.
the Microsoft is just too good in that area. So you guys have set the standard too high. I mean, when I say you guys, I mean the Microsoft guys. Until recently, the solution is you're a man.
Is have an argument about VI versus Emacs or something?
I mean, every man that considers himself a man can use VI and type code directly, right?
Right.
Or Emacs or whatever. Today, luckily, the light has been shown to many of us, and a couple of guys from the community too. They ported this thing called Sharp Develop, which is an open source IDE for built on .NET actually, and they ported it over to Linux. They took out Windows Forms and they put in GTK Sharp, so to make it absolutely as native as possible, right? So they've done that, and that's been kind of an eye-opener for all of us macho kind of Unix people. So that's the first step. Of course, there's a very long path from where we are to get to the functionality that Visual Studio has, but it's the kind of thing that we're looking into. I mean, everybody's really interested in this. The IDE is very simple to use. We're integrating the debugger into that.
Is it possible to hook into Visual Studio so that we could develop right to your libraries?
Yes. In fact, I mean, people have already done it. There's a couple of tutorials, and we're going to be publishing a couple new tutorials now that it's more of it's 1.0. People have been doing it, and they've been really nice with the docs. So we'll publish a couple of tutorials so you can see how to use it with Visual Studio.
Right.
There's also this company called Mainsoft. I don't know if you remember that company.
Uh-huh.
But Mainsoft takes our class libraries and compiles them to Java, which again they can do it because of our license is so lax, and they actually will compile your code, your Visual Studio, whatever it is that you produce with Visual Studio. They'll translate it from .NET bytecodes into Java bytecodes, and they will run it on a Java application server. So they have a funky product because you develop your ASP.NET apps, and it gets deployed into any Java system that you might have. So to some people, that is interesting because they can integrate J2EE with ASP.NET. So it's been done. We haven't done the homework ourselves, but this company has. So that's one option. And the other one is waiting for the tutorials, which are coming up next week, that describe how can you use the APIs that we have, like GTK Sharp or Cocoa Sharp within Visual Studio. I mean, at least for Cocoa Sharp, you will be able to build, you will not be able to test.
Okay.
Right? You need to copy the binary over to the Mac to test. But, I mean, or the other thing you can do is you can do file sharing, right? So the executable actually lives on the Mac. So if you have two machines, you can you're compiling one machine and developing one machine, but run on the other one.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in MonoDevelop, there is IntelliSense and there's built-in documentation viewing and all this other stuff. Right. But obviously, one thing that any developers who are maybe experimenting with Linux and with MonoDevelop and Mono might wind up missing, especially if they're coming from the Windows world, is going to be a forms designer. And I've been reading the Mono book that I bought at the OSCon when you were in town recently, in which you signed for me. Thank you very much. I'm so excited about that. And I was
at the airport, Rory, or was that?
that was actually down at the Marriott. There was the open source convention here, and I went down and said hi to everybody, and I got to chat with Miguel for a little while.
Cool.
But I noticed that there was Glade support for Mono.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a different model than the forms model that people are used to. And the difference is basically it's a bit like XAML, right? With Glade, what you do is you first design your UI in a tool, right? And that generates an XML representation of it. And then in a completely separate place, you actually develop your I hate this word, but I'm going to use it. Your business logic. I hate it. I hate myself now. So you separate your presentation from your business logic, and that's how we've been developing GNOME all this time. I mean, GNOME is completely built on that. We have designers doing the design independently of the hackers, which tend to suck at design.
Yeah, good idea. So you can basically take the output from Glade, and then you can use that XML, and you can turn it into the. I mean, could you have something to convert it into the Cocoa Sharp code? Could you have something to do it as GTK Sharp, and something to do it in any other particular?
Okay, So with GTK, I mean, that's one option, and a couple of people have done it, but we haven't done it ourselves. So it would be a matter of integrating it into the IDE. I can tell you that the problem today we have with Glade is that the integration is not where the Windows people expect it to be, right?
Right.
If you add, for example, if you say, well, when I click on this button, I want to call this method, right? Today with Glade, you have to say, okay, I want to call a method, right? On button when clicked, right? But you still have to go and type yourself the signature for the method, right? So the integration, I mean, it's a tiny thing, right? But it really helps you when it comes to quickly starting up your development.
Well, for RAD development, for example.
Your RAD development. So we don't have the integration where we would like it to be. So it's definitely one of the areas where we're looking at improving that, either by making changes to Glade or writing a new version of Glade. And the only reason I'm saying writing a new version of Glade is because Glade is known to have some usability limitations. It's not your friendliest GUI designer. So.
All right.
Well, Miguel, this is a good place to take a pause and pay the bills and listen to some music. So we're going to pause right now. When we come back, we're going to ask Miguel about some of the more practical aspects of getting started, us Windows people who are Linux stupid. And we'll also talk to him about that famous song that Don Bach sang to him and some of that other fun stuff. So stick around. We'll be right back.
this morning at 4. I went back for my lighter, but they locked the door. We got every kind of novelty right here on the shore. Let me sing you the new London blues. When you come here, don't forget the secret theater. Just when you thought the shit could get no weirder, grab a bowl of beans and don't forget to wipe. We got Thai and Japanese here, but there ain't no tribe. Jimmy's down on Bank Street, he'll be wailing all night, just appealing the new London blues. Get up on an airplane, or maybe take the fast train. Come and spend the whole Saturday. Take I-95, it's just an hour away. Well, I just got off the ferry from Long Island. Left at 3 this morning from the Highlands. Doctor said I'll be okay for a day or two. I take my medication, but I dropped the tube. I swear to God, I never even touched that dude. I was just digging the new London blues. Get up on an airplane, or maybe take the fast train. Come and spend the whole Saturday. Take I-95, it's just an hour away.
Hey, Carl Franklin here, giving a shout out to my friends at Data Dynamics. We've talked a lot about Active Reports on this show, and this is no exception. So I'm talking about ActiveReports.net. This is a port of their popular Active Reports program. If you're currently thinking of doing reporting in .NET for Windows Forms or web applications, check out Active Reports for .NET. Many of my friends in the business use and swear by ActiveReports.net. I use it as well. Now, let me just tell you, to say that the reporting is simple does it an injustice, because it makes you think that it can only do simple things. It can do very powerful things, but you don't have to go through hoops just to set up a simple report. When you create a report, the report exists with your application, okay? It doesn't exist on a server somewhere. All right, we're not talking about enterprise reporting. We're talking about, I have some data, I want to print it out, or I want to show it to the user. PDF format is supported, HTML format is supported. All the great features you'd expect from a reporting engine, drop dead simple, and the best part, it's not going to break the bank. They have a great licensing scheme that's easy to deal with. So check it out at www.datadynamics.com. Now let's get back to our show. And we're back. Thanks for sticking around. This is Carl Franklin. Rory Blythe is out there. Our guest tonight is Miguel de Icaza, the mono god himself. And before we get back to our discussion with Miguel, I have an announcement to make about some MSDN events that are happening in New England. Okay, these are free events for developers. And Joe Stagner is providing these free talks on .NET, and I just wanted to give an announcement of what these are. So these are free events you can go to at your local place, your local Microsoft place. He's doing developing Microsoft Office InfoPath 2003 solutions with Visual Studio .NET 2003, building ASP.NET custom controls, and an ASP.NET 2.0 overview. And you can check it out at msdnevents.com. The schedule is August 10th at 1 p.m. in Burlington, Vermont, August 12th in Manchester, New Hampshire, August 24th in Providence, Rhode Island, August 26th in Boston, Mass., September 14th in Worcester, Massachusetts, September 16th in Hartford, Connecticut, September 21st in 2004. It's free and packed with intense how-to technical information on developing solutions with Microsoft tools and technologies. And it's a great place to come, see cool demos, and share ideas with your peers, and get great resources to take home with you. So you can register at www.msdnevents.com. And Rory.
Yeah.
It's time. You know what time it is, man. It's time for
it's Google Weirdos time.
Weirdos.
Yes, indeed.
Weirdos, 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 Google weirdos, 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 Google weirdos, weirdos, weirdos.
So, and if you don't know what Google Weirdos is, go to www.franklins.net/.netrocks. There's a link. What is Google Weirdos? Because we're sick of explaining it. So it's weird. That's all we're going to say. So what are the shouts-outs this week, Rory?
All right, the shouts-outs this week that I was able to find, you got to remember, I put this week's Google Weirdos together in less than 3 minutes because after my dog chewed through my power cord, I didn't have time to get everything together. So it's not as big as always, but there's good stuff this week. The shouts-outs begin with Rory Blythe, I am your adoptive son, and I miss you. And I guess I miss you too, Sonny. I don't really miss you because I didn't even know until tonight that you existed, so I can't really miss you. I don't even know you. We're gonna have to kind of work through this step by step and get to know each other. The next
probably
one
stuck to a Kleenex somewhere. Don't worry about it.
The next one, oh God, Carl.
Sorry.
The next one is Rory Blythe. I enter the tablet PC competition, Carl. So that was signed you.
Interesting.
I think there's some ethical issues there. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look into that.
You're disqualified, whoever you are.
Yeah. Next one is Rory Blythe uses Pascal, and I don't, but I used to. And if it were the last language on earth, I would still use it. It's not my favorite, but I have nothing against it. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I wasn't here to badmouth Pascal. I think Pascal's a fine thing. Next one is, hey, Rory Blythe, this is Carl. I thought you could use some props for this week's Google Weirdos segment. I am not wearing pants. That's not really right. Props, you sick weirdo.
That was me.
Richard, but you are wearing pants, right? I think. You're wearing pants, right?
Yeah, I actually am.
You got pants. Okay.
No, I'm not. Technically, I'm wearing shorts, so.
Oh, well, whatever. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, your privies are covered.
Yeah, well, not tighty whities.
Yeah, I didn't see Richard's. I'll get that for next week.
Okay.
I had to go through this so quickly. So those were the shouts outs. Now here are the Google Weirdos for this week. The first one is medicine for dogs that pee. I just want to say, whoever did that, there is nothing wrong with your dog. It's perfectly natural for your dog to urinate and to want to urinate. If your dog did not urinate, you would have some problems. It's kind of like saying medication for dogs that breathe, or a medication for dogs whose hearts pump blood through their bodies. There's nothing wrong with your dog.
Pesky respiration problem.
Yeah, right. And the next Google Weirdo is right-click isn't working. And I think this is great because I'm willing to bet that it's somebody with an iMac and one of those one-button Macintosh mice, who for some reason can't figure out why right-click isn't working. Probably because there's no right button. Right. The next one is utilities for converting Basic programs to run in XP. Yeah, that's kind of like asking for a utility that would convert your punch cards or your Abacus to run in XP. You're probably not going to find anything there. The next one is eating escargot while pregnant. And I say forget while pregnant. What about like eating escargot while sober?
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
there's so much more risky behavior that can involve escargot. The pregnancy is something you can worry about much further down the line. There's plenty of innocent people every day who take escargot into their mouths. And what about them? That's what I'm wondering about. It's disgusting. That's Google Weirdos for the night. Wieners, wieners,
Wieners, wieners,
wieners, wieners,
wieners, wieners,
wieners, wieners,
wieners, wieners,
wieners,
wieners,
wieners, wieners.
So we're back with Miguel de Icaza, the mono god himself, and we've gleaned a few questions from the chat room, but mostly people are concerned about the practical aspect of how to get started. You know, for a lot of these programmers that listen to our show don't run Linux. They don't understand what man is, and they don't know what what all these command line tools are. So how does one get started? Where does one go if we're completely Linux zombies and Linux newbies, but we do definitely want to get started with Mono?
The easiest way really is to get to the download page in the Mono site and set yourself install everything that is in there. We have partitioned Mono in many different pieces because in Linux people want to have only the necessary stuff. But if you just get the large package that has everything in there, it is a good starting point. It comes with Mono developed, so you should have a familiar face. Maybe not as powerful as Visual Studio or what you're used to,
right.
But it will give you a familiar face at least on Linux, and then you can take it from there.
Because I downloaded the Windows installation this afternoon, and that just contained a few exes, command line exes, and the what I consider the framework.
Yeah, we don't
Mono.
have something like Mono. I mean, we basically didn't produce something like Mono developed for Windows.
Right.
So the Windows people.
That's a runtime then.
Advantage there. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically like downloading the .NET framework
Right.
package without IDEs or anything. That's
So
what
that'll-
you get on Windows. On Linux, you get a little bit more. You do get the IDE.
Okay.
As I said, not as good as Visual Studio or
Right.
remotely close to, but it will get you started.
Right. Okay. All right. Good. And what do you recommend is in terms of a version of Linux for the complete Linux newbie? Like, what's going to be the least painful?
I would say that the productized versions. I mean, I'm an employee of Novell, so you should
Right.
take my comments with the proper grain of salt, right?
Right.
So you can try the Novell Linux distribution, or you can try Red Hat's Fedora or Fedora Core. I think they're fine products. Which other one is interesting to look at? A lot of people use Debian because it has a large community, but I would say that the two commercial ones are fairly simple for end users to install and get up and running.
Okay.
The upcoming version of Novell Linux will have Mono pre-bundled and pre-configured and everything else. So it should just pop up in your menu as your development platform.
Oh, that's cool. So, how long I guess this is kind of a silly question to ask you, but how long have you been using Unix? You've been using it probably since you were first, you could first crawl up the table and put your hands on a keyboard, I bet.
No, not really. I would say that I started using it seriously around 1992, and it was mostly because my PC took too long to reboot. I mean, I was a Windows
so you were a
developer.
PC guy first?
Yeah. I started programming BASIC, and then I learned Turbo Pascal like everybody else, and and then Windows came out, and I was developing with Microsoft C, I guess C.5.1 or something. I don't know, but the problem is I kept crashing Windows because I kept not releasing my DC handles or my something.
Yeah, right.
And the problem is that I had a PS280, and it took about a minute, 20 seconds to go from my crash to me getting back to speed inside Windows, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a big waste of time.
Right.
So, and we had a couple of sound workstations, and so back in the day, I mean, if in a sound workstation, if you messed up something, you would just get a segmentation fault, right? So to me, that was a big productivity improvement. If something was wrong, I would get a seg fault as opposed to having to wait for a minute for this thing to cycle down, right? So I guess the song got me addicted.
Okay. Well, Tyson M wants to know, how good is the Slackware support?
I don't know. We didn't test really Slackware. See, in Linux, we do have a lot. I mean, one of the benefits of open source is anyone can roll their own versions of anything, and you have every right to do it. But one of the disadvantages is that there are too many Unix distributions, and we only get to test it on a few. We test it on the ones that the mainstream people are using. So we do test it on Debian, we do test it on Red Hat and SUSE, and a couple of the big machines like S390s and Solaris and so on, the Mac. But we really cannot test every possible combination. So the question really is, how complete is your Linux distribution?
Sure.
I would say the commercial versions are pretty complete. If you're not using one of the mainstream ones, chances are it is not as tested or as complete as the big boys.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is, I know that right now people can use NAND with Mono, but are you ever going to be doing any sort of version of MS Build for Mono?
I think time will tell. If a lot of people start shipping MS Build projects, we might look into that. We were also, I mean, like everybody else, we think that the current set of development tools for project control and files is just not where it should be. I mean, we've invested a lot in good compilers and languages, but I don't think anybody has really invested the time to fix the build problems and configuration management problems for software. So, so a couple of guys in the Mono team actually came up with this thing called Mono Build about a year ago, and it has a lot of really, really interesting concepts. It uses a syntax similar to a Makefile, but it uses .NET assembly, so you can extend the rules on the system with .NET assemblies, and it's more in line with what we expect on the Unix world. So we're looking at something along those lines, and I personally think that MS Build is I mean, I wouldn't like to write those files myself. So
sure.
That is a problem that I have. I cannot remember the syntax of anything. Makefiles are like, well, here's a target, here's how you build it, go, right? So I think that there's still a lot of value in the simplicity of a Makefile, and so I think that the guys doing the Mono Build system are onto something. I don't know yet what it is, but I think it has a chance of being good. As to MS Build, maybe we'll have to implement it if it becomes ubiquitous.
Okay. You know, Ron wanted to know from the chat room, to what extent is Mono going to keep up with the versions that come out of Microsoft of the .NET framework? And I suppose we're talking about the non-Longhorn builds.
I think those are easy to keep track of because they're relatively well isolated, so they can be kept track of. It is not directly my objective, or we're investing a lot more time into things like things that are directly related to Unix and Linux and the GNOME desktop. But the community does jump into those things. So the answer is basically that it depends how much interest there is in the community. So, for example, you see ASP.NET and ADO.NET as complete in Mono, but you don't see things like installation services or service pros or whatever, because there was not a lot of need from people. So I think it's going to be bound a lot to what people actually need, and what are the things that people depend on. So if it's something that a lot of people depend on, you'll probably see a team of people forming up doing it. Now, when it comes to the Longhorn APIs, as I said, I think it's still debatable whether we have the energy to follow with that. And I think that it takes too much advantage of the Longhorn architecture. So, and
look how long it's taken Microsoft, with all their bazillions of developers to get version 1 out the door. So maybe do you guys think you're going to go in another Longhorn-like direction, but don't try to imitate anybody? I mean, I guess, some critics of the Mono project say that, you guys are always going to be playing catch-up. Do you ever see a launching point for Mono where it just goes in its own direction?
Well, it already kind of has, right? Because with our separate stack. So it already has done that. I personally have a couple of... I think that what Microsoft is doing with Longhorn is really interesting, but I also feel that... and I know that this is a commonplace sentence. Does that expression exist in English, commonplace?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So I know it's a commonplace, but I think that the Longhorn APIs are suffering a bit from second system syndrome.
Right.
I mean, I've sent a couple of comments to some of the people involved in Avalon. I said, hey, I mean, I know that you guys are doing good, but here in particular, as a developer, I think are the problems with Avalon, which is the one thing I've looked the most into. I think in its current position, it might be a bit of a liability. And we can go deeper into that, but I think that it's overcomplicated and for no good reason, and that Microsoft might be shooting themselves in the foot this time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know. The jury's still out on whether and what we have to do. The GNOME community, of course, has its own plans on how to support vector graphics and accelerated video. So we're kind of we can follow them today, or we can do our own thing. So. So it's still a big thing open for debate.
And Bob from the chat room asks you a question. He says, my company currently develops apps in VB6, 40-plus applications for Windows 2000 environment. There is talk about moving to .NET development, but we haven't seen enough payback if we remain in a Windows environment. But there may be a payback if we could eliminate our Windows cost by moving to Linux. My question is, at this point in time, is Mono/VSNet an appropriate technology to target our OS migration plan for migrating?
As I said earlier today, as long as you compile on Windows and you deploy on Linux, you will be fine. But you cannot. But we don't have a compiler today for Linux, so you would still have a mixed environment today.
Yeah. You'd have to forego your Microsoft development tools, which are obviously very, very nice.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you can do, and this is what some people are doing, is the developers can continue developing on Windows, right? They don't have to forego their tools, but they can deploy on non-Windows systems. They can deploy on Macs, or they can deploy on their mainframes, or they can deploy on Linux cheapo $300 Dell computers, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's where the flexibility would be for someone like them.
Yeah, I think one general rule, though, is that if your administration team has more Windows and IIS knowledge than they have, say, Unix and Apache knowledge, then it's probably best to just stick with what you have. But if your team already knows, Unix and Apache and doesn't know anything about Windows and IIS, then, it's questionable whether or not they'd want to move to a Microsoft platform. Essentially, it seems to be probably stick with what you know, I would imagine.
Yeah, and also you should not discount the fact that sysadmins and IT people really love to learn new things. So I wouldn't discount the fact that there are people who look into Linux just out of curiosity, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so there might be some of that, right? For example, I can tell you that today there was in this Munich deployment, one of the softwares that they're running in there is provided by a German company that only does Visual Studio development, and they turned to Mono and filed tons of bug reports and bug fixes actually to the project in the past 6 months to make sure that their provisioning and inventory software worked just fine on Mono, right, on these Linux servers. So it is an option. Developers keep using Visual Studio, but they deploy in different kind of systems.
Mm-hmm. Are there any, Fanzu wants to know, are there any known commercial applications running Mono?
Yeah, there's a couple. In fact, SourceGear paid us to do web services for Mono so they could ship their Vault product for Linux and Mac OS, right? So web services was something we were not looking into doing, but we got funded by them to do it. We also have Novell is shipping iFolder. iFolder version 3 is built on Mono and shipping on Mono for Linux, and we'll be working also on NetWare. All of the work that the NATS team is doing, which is all this stuff about searching and photo management, and all of the new desktop improvements, which are commercially supported by Novell, are also commercial products. There's a company called Winfesser, which builds IEM solutions, and they certify their software on Mono as well, and they will do the tech support for Mono as well if you use their product. So there's a couple. They're starting to appear, yeah.
Okay. It's a good question about strong names. If you're building things on, if you can compile with VS on Windows and run it on Linux, does that mean Mono is ignoring the strong names?
No, we actually use the strong names. We use the same public keys that Microsoft has.
Oh, cool.
I think we have a compatibility mapping because we don't have the same private key, obviously. So we have a mapping file that says you map this number to our number, and that's how we run those strong name assemblies.
And that's how I can run, against. Yeah, that's a very good point. Because if you didn't solve that problem, you wouldn't be able to be cross-platform.
That's right.
Yeah, very cool. Looking for some more questions from the chat room. Here we go.
Well, here's one. How about a website using Mono?
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't even really talked about ASP.NET.
That's from IC.
Who's using websites? Well, this application in Germany I mentioned, it was purely ASP. But
Okay.
every once in a while, I pose the question, so who's using this for website? And a bunch of people reply with this obscure websites, nothing of the size of Amazon.com, so
Sure.
nothing like that. But there's lots of little people running of small sites in different parts of the world, like Romanian sites that I cannot read or even pretend to understand what it means. So it's being used. It's just nothing really popular at this point.
Well, yeah, and most sites aren't the
come and
size
say,
of...
hey guys,
Yeah.
Google is completely mono-based, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
And most sites aren't Amazon sized, and I think the vast majority of sites really are, smaller projects or things you're just sticking up for, some application that goes out to 20 people or whatever. So that's not too much of a surprise.
I can't imagine what it must be like with you guys knowing that Microsoft Legal is like watching over your shoulder for you to violate some sort of patent or some naming or trademark or something. I mean, does that kind of, concern filter down to the developers, or like before you can do anything or say anything, do you guys have to have meetings and stuff? I can imagine it can be quite
Well, we have a few
daunting.
policies in place, right? Like I said, you don't look at rotor code, you don't copy
Right.
rotor code. We have to implement everything from scratch. We have to have a trail record of how things were implemented.
But like, ADONet, ASP.NET, those are like trademark things. And
Yeah, I don't think we even call it ADO. I mean, that's a good point. Maybe we shouldn't be calling ADO.NET
or
We're looking
VB.NET.
into that. But when it comes to, I think the tricky question is what patents there are. And we're not aware of one right now. But if there was one, our strategy is to either see if there was prior art to the patent at the time it was filed. And if so,
Yeah.
then the patent becomes invalid.
And
If not, try
trademarks
to
too, though.
implement the same feature using a different technique. And if that is not possible, then we would have to remove the feature and provide an alternate way of doing things. It would be API incompatible.
Uh-huh.
So we do have a process in place when anybody claims to have a patent IP claim, be it Microsoft or anyone else, right? Anyone
Yeah.
who has built anything there.
Right.
And the problem today really is that if you write more than 500 lines of code, you're probably infringing on someone else's invention, right?
Oh, God.
So my advice is stick to really simple scripts if
Yeah.
you want to avoid any legal problems.
Wow.
And do you think there's any worry in the commercial world that Mono is great, but if Microsoft, gets upset and finds some legal precedent if it gets too popular, and like, do you guys get concerned about that, or do you think other people are concerned?
I think there's plenty of concern when it comes from especially from the most extremist part of the community.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of people who just do not like the fact that Mono exists and think that we should be working on Java, or doing an open source implementation of Java. Because Java is also non-free, right?
Right. And there's all sorts of legal issues there, right?
And yeah, of course. And if you implement Java, then you only get a patent grant. You don't know which patents they own, or whether they apply or not. But they say you will get a patent grant if you obey the following license, and you have to pass the test. So you can't really have a free implementation of Java without potential infringing on some.
Yeah.
So it's a very you can imagine it's a very touchy issue. There's in one hand you have the pro Java people, anti C# people, then you have the anti Microsoft people versus the free software people.
Look, I mean, in our own community, we have anti VB and anti C# people. So
there you go.
And these people are both on the same team. It's like, come on, guys.
So, exactly. So, and we're in the middle of the hurricane, right? So we're in the middle of two battles, and so you can see that there's a lot of arguments being thrown on both directions.
Yeah. What do you think about?
I try to stay out of those as much as possible.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, but you guys are the ones that are innovating. So I've been in that situation where, you're almost afraid to go in a direction because you're not sure if it's going to draw fire. If technically, I don't know. But I'm also talking not just about patents, but about trademarks too. About it, but how can you say that you support the VB.net language when that's a trademark, or will you have to say Mono
Well, you guys
Basic
have Mono
that's
Basic,
compatible with Visual Basic?
I think we have to. It's a good point, and I'll raise it up with the marketing folks to find out the appropriate wording for that. I just blatantly go through life saying VB.net.
Sure.
And I don't go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I sound a lot more boring than I already sound. I mean, technically, you should do it. So I just go like that.
Well, speaking, now that we're having some fun, I want to bring up some things that actually got some press in certain circles. But Don Box says your ass is his. Your reply?
I don't remember what I said. What?
No, I don't know I don't know if you have replied. I mean, we've just heard. Don. I asked Don if he wants to recruit you, and he said it's not a matter of if I'm going to recruit him. I am recruiting him. I'm actively recruiting him, and his ass is mine. So,
I mean, no, it's obviously not out of the question. I still think that I can convince Microsoft of the benefits of open source. So
yeah, and he thinks you're a really smart guy, and he said he'd like to have you on the team.
I think people are confused, and they confuse the work of my team with my work.
Yeah.
So I think that what Don really wants is to hire my team.
Yeah.
So because they're a lot better than I am. So.
And there was also an event that made Spencer F. Cat in the back of PC Week. That I don't know if you remember this, but I was actually playing guitar on this when Don sang Miguel to the words of Michelle.
Oh, you were there.
I was the guitar player, man.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was playing with Band on the Runtime, although I was playing drums, and then I stepped out to play guitar. And Don sang to you, and I remember when we got there, he asked, some bus monkey came up to him and said, "Is there anything I can get for you?" And he says, "Yes. Go get me a rose."
Oh my God! Oh, it was very embarrassing. But I think my wife and my mother was there.
Yeah, so he put a rose in his teeth and danced with you while singing Miguel to the tune of Michelle.
Yeah, I think my wife and my mother really were. I mean, they had a good time laughing at me that night.
Oh, it was so much fun.
So, Miguel, if this is something I've been wondering about ever since I first heard about that.
Yeah.
I know that Don Box wants you at Microsoft, but I've never heard what he would want you to do there.
Yeah, I kind of asked him the same thing.
That's a very good point. I don't know. I guess having fun, right?
Well, no, that'd be cool. I mean, if you were just hanging out, that'd, be perfectly good enough. But did he ever mention any sort of a position that you could possibly tell us about, or?
No, I don't think we've got to that point. We haven't got to that negotiation point. We've only you pretty much have heard everything that there is to say about it on with the song and the your ass is mine.
Yeah.
And how that ass will shine.
If they want to pay me to chill out, I'll be down. I don't know if I'm suited for this work thing.
Oh no. Yeah. So there was one more good question in the chat room that I wanted to ask you, and it's from somebody named Tysonum, Tysonm. He says, "How did?"
Maybe?
Yeah, Tyson M. Sorry, it's getting late. I'm tired. He says, "How does Mono compare to .gnu?"
How does Mono compare to .gnu? .gnu is another effort that attempts to do about the same thing. It is not clear to me why they're building it yet. I mean, I know why I'm building Mono. I don't know why they're building theirs. The big differences, what are the differences? They implement most as much as possible in C, and we implement as much as possible in C#.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a replication of effort that has to do with it's just moronic. I mean, the whole split is moronic. Have you seen The Life of Brian, that movie?
Yeah, of course.
Monty Python, and then you have two fractions.
Oh, right. They have almost exactly the same name, right?
And the Judea Liberation Army or something like that. So it gets as moronic as that. It has to do a bit with whether we're going to call Linux or GNU Linux. I don't even want to go there because it's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of petty political crap.
Yeah. So we refuse to go there, and Richard Stallman obviously doesn't like that. So he's got a bunch of people motivated to do another implementation that will give Linux the credit GNU that it deserves or something like that.
Hmm.
So I think it's a duplication of effort. But on the other hand, I don't think Mono and .GNU are the last ones re-implementations of the framework. I mean, I think that there's like 50 implementations of Java or maybe 100, right? I think the same thing will happen with .NET. You'll see .NET for embedded devices. You'll see it on a fridge. I know that there's another 2 implementations of .NET, at least one of them which fits in like 50K or 200K.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, micro something.
Yeah, they have one that runs on a smart card.
Microkernel. They have one that runs on a wristwatch.
Yeah, well, that's from Microsoft, but I'm talking about a third party.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
what I mean is, I think there's going to be more implementations. It's just the same that the .NET people are pretty much have the same goals, or they cannot articulate a different goal, and they're a bit of I would have to say they're a little bit on the ideological perspective, kind of the extremist side of free software.
Okay.
Well, Miguel, before we get to Richard the Toy Boy, which I really want you to hang around because it's kind of special. I just want to ask you a couple more questions before we do that.
Yep.
One, and I'll ask you both, and then you can answer them both. One is, what do you like best about the .NET framework? What is the coolest thing that Microsoft did with the .NET framework? And the second one is, what is the worst?
Oh God, those are two good questions. To be honest, I think that C# has an extremely good taste in design as a language. And I think that Anders so far has done an incredible job of keeping the language taste good, despite all the additions that they've done. So that is I think one of the most valuable things, that you have somebody so concerned about doing the right thing for the language. Very unlikely the C++ philosophy, which Bjorn Strusup described as, if it doesn't slow down the default path, it goes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think it's a great strategy for language design. So there are individual pieces of .NET which are just fantastic. The XML serializer I thought was a pretty good idea. But I would say that the language is probably the area that I like the most.
Yeah.
The fact that it's managed. I mean, and there's so many side effects of that, right?
Right.
Boxing, unboxing. The fact that now we have generics.
Yeah.
The fact that we have value types. So I think it all comes down from the core of ECMA. The pieces that I like the least, it's not really criticizing Microsoft. I understand they had to ship a product, and it's very understandable that they are one of the few people in the industry that they realize that sometimes you have to say we have to ship now.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain areas of the .NET framework that could have used a little bit more design.
Okay.
The collection classes could have used a little bit more of loving, or learn a little bit more from Java.
Right.
Tiny little things. I mean, it's nothing that you say, I'm not going to use .NET because of this.
Right.
But there is certainly room for improvement. I guess probably my only beef is that moving forward, there's a sense that there's going to be a lot of APIs written and thrown away, and I'm not sure it's a fantastic idea yet.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Miguel, before we wrap up with you, I'd like you to stick around while we bring on Richard Campbell, who's on the phone tonight from Vancouver, in this section that we like to call Richard the Toy Boy.
39 speakers in my living room. NASA complains about the sonic boom. 10-foot high screen, 20 feet wide. Strap it in time.
How you doing, Richard?
I'm good, Carl.
All right, you've been surfing the web looking for the world's best and world's toys this week?
Oh, it's become an obsession of mine. I mean, it was already crazy before the show, but since the show, I now have a logical justification for this obsessive behavior, and boy, I'm taking advantage of it.
And everyone wants to know, will you ever top the smart clamp?
I have a couple in my pocket that I just wonder if the FCC will put me in jail if I actually put them on the show. And I keep looking at them every week and saying, no, I'm just not prepared to deal with those toys. Because there's some really sick people out on the internet, let me tell you. And they're making stuff and charging money for it. It's just baffles.
Well, what's sick is people are buying it too.
Well, witness the DVD rewinder. I mean, the most
it's
amazing
out of stock
of all time. And they're sold out.
Yeah, they're sold out.
They're totally wiped out of them. All right. Shall we get to today's toy? And today's toy, I was one of my favorites. It's a classic, and I'm using Shrinkster now because Rory's always right, and so Shrinkster is a good thing. So check out shrinkster.com/6G. G as in golf.
Okay,
That's going to take you to a link for a division of Cisco Systems called Linksys, and it's pointing to a device called the WRT54G.
Seems like a kind of a
broadband router. It's a NAT router. Now, if you don't have one of these, and I imagine everybody who's on live with us, certainly, if not all listeners, has a NAT router. If you don't, go get one. But that is not what makes this interesting. In fact, you may even be thinking right now, okay, the toy boy's lost his mind. This thing's been around for a long time. Big deal. That's not what makes this thing cool, that it's a broadband router. What makes it cool is it runs Linux.
Okay.
So let me take you to another link.
Okay.
Shrinkster.com/6H. So 6H takes you to a website on seattlewireless.net. And this is a group of folks hacking the holy snot out of these routers. Because it's Linux. They've got a bash prompt out of their $150 router.
Awesome.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, what are the kinds of things that they can crank it up to?
The big thing is that there are 5 Ethernet ports on that Linksys router, right? One is marked WAN, and the other 4 are regular ports. But inside the box, they're all identical.
Okay.
So if you're set up like I am with 2 internet connections, you can create 2 WAN ports and do load balancing between them and all that kind of fancy stuff.
Cool.
Quality of service stuff. We're all going voice over IP phone now, right? So being able to say, hey, any packets on these ports take priority over all the other packets, that's not a problem. Not the sort of a feature you typically find in a $1,000 router, not a $100 router. But because this thing's running Linux, it can do it.
Huh.
Now, before everybody goes running off buying one of these things and going nuts, you can break your router doing this. If you load up a bad patch of firmware, it's not going to work anymore. Now, they have done some custom builds already on this website that you can use and so forth, but it is not a trivial thing to patch up your router. But I wanted to show you, this is really a classic demonstration of the power of Linux, which will run on all kinds of different environments, and also a demonstration of this open source environment, this open source world where groups of people get together to do cool stuff they really enjoy.
Right.
And we get a better product consequence.
It's very cool. So do they have any forums up there for people so you can find out, which things work, which things break?
Yes. Although, now, this is an open source community. For those of us who have not spent any time in there, if you do not read the docs first, you will get eaten alive on the forum.
Yeah.
You have never seen so much RTFM so fast in your life if you slacked off before you pump up a message on one of these news groups. These guys work hard on their code, and they expect you to be completely up to speed before you say word 1.
Yeah. Good point.
All right. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Cool toy.
I'm
glad you like it. I'm already off past the line. I've got a Cisco 3620 in my rack now, so I'm already doing a lot of this goofy stuff the hard and expensive way, but it's certainly a product I would grab onto. So.
Okay. What's the heinous toy of the week here?
The heinous toy of the week. So back to shrinkster.com /6i. 6 indigo. Now that's going to take you to a very odd site, which is actually a French site called violet.net. And they make this box. They call it an emotional lamp.
What is it really?
A box with blinky lights in it that costs $1,000. Okay, I mean, it even looks like a kitchen lamp, right? It's frosted and it has a wire coming out of it. And just for the record, it costs us €790. Okay,
oh my God.
You can order it directly from them. They'll ship it to you from France. It runs Linux.
Holy shit!
It's a lamp that runs Linux. Now, I like the fact that I could have a kitchen lamp that has an IP address. That, to me, is a feature. But do I need to pay $1,000 for it?
What does it do for $1,000?
Well, it's an emotional lamp. right?
Don't you get it, Carl?
I have teenage daughters. That's enough emotion for me right there. I don't really need a lamp doing that.
Well, you might laugh, but I have a friend that bought 8 of those guys.
No!
Linux. I don't know if it's running Linux, but it's the same thing.
Oh my
Same
God.
kind of thing. I mean, it's almost like it's one of those color organ things you built in grade 9 electronics.
I'm still waiting for the feature list here.
See,
Well,
the ones that he bought were only $700, and these guys are
that's it?
€790.
Oh well.
So
This
there's
is
a
a bargain.
cheaper version that maybe doesn't need a full Unix system to be emotional, but they synchronize all together, and it's really pretty.
Well,
So
and
that's
the idea is that you can hook it into weather, so it turns certain colors for weather, or certain emails to certain people, you'd get different colors from that. I just don't see the need to decode this, right? What do I want? A box flashing Morse code to me telling my email came in? That I paid $1,000 for?
This is insane.
This is the French in action. This is why French people should not develop technology. You're looking at it right here. Make these people stop.
Oh my God. So that's really it. It runs it has a computer on board with a Linux operating system that controls the lamp.
That's right. It
That's
makes these
it.
different lights, change
It has
different colors, blink
has
different
no input.
That's
right?
It's a $1,000 box of blinky lights.
Oh my God.
You like it?
I don't know what to say, Richard. How are we going to? What are we going to give away?
Well,
today,
I think
Richard.
we should give away one of these Linksys routers.
Okay. Sure.
It's not a hugely expensive toy, but I'd really like to see one of the .NET Rocks people sit down, experiment with this thing, try on some of these custom firmwares, and get a feel for what this thing can do for you, and possibly really take advantage of it. I think anybody who's got a Vonage phone is going to be very interested in a solution like this.
Okay. So, what's the contest going to be?
I'm glad you asked. Now, in order for you to win one of these prizes, you have to answer a question that comes from the website that we've been looking at regarding specifically hacking the Linksys server. What I want to know is what the original version of the Linux kernel running on the Linksys router was. The very first version, and it is listed in there. So if you can take a look around, see if you can find it. I want to know the original version of the Linux kernel installed on that Linksys router.
Okay.
First one to deliver it to Carl wins the router.
So if you know the answer to that, send it to .NETRocks@franklins.net, and the first one with the right answer is going to win one of these hackable Linksys routers. And I'm sorry, you can't just send it in the chat room. You're going to have to send it to .NETRocks@franklins.net. We'll play a little music. Not really.
And I'm looking for the version number.
Okay. Yes, we have a winner. The answer is Linux kernel 2.4.5, and the winner is Jeff. JFANSLEN. I don't know your last name, Jeff, but congratulations. You're in the hackable Linux-based Linksys router. May you have many happy hacking days. Richard, that was just great. Thanks, man.
My pleasure, guys.
Richard the Toy Boy,
Cool.
ladies and gentlemen, right here on .NET Rocks. So what do you think of that craziness, Miguel?
That was pretty good.
Yeah, you should rewind and go back and see some of the other crap that we gave away. Some of it's just absolutely mind-blowing.
I will. I'll check it out.
Some guy made a flamethrower from $100 worth of parts at Home Depot. That was good. We didn't give one of those away, though. Well, anyway, we're coming towards the end of the show. Miguel, you have any last-minute words of wisdom to impart on the listening audience? Anything that you want to plug or messages you want to send?
No, not really. I mean, if people have some comments or suggestions or they want to get in touch with me, they can send me email at miguel@zimian.com or miguel@novell.com. I don't think I have anything else at this point.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to future releases of Mono, and man, I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been for me. I know Rory was really pumped, and I also feel bad for Jeff, who runs Linux. He's out in the sound room there, and I'm sure he wanted to jump in several times and ask you all sorts of questions. But thanks thanks again. And
Thank you so much for the invitation, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for coming.
All right, we'll talk to you later.